Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Life Springs podcast. Life Springs is an international ministry existing to connect, encourage, and prepare women worldwide to bring the love of Jesus to our communities. We are on our last episode of a series called Kingdom Assignments. Kingdom assignments are the missions, projects, and ministries that God calls us to so that we can be his hands and feet, loving our neighbors, serving those around us, and sharing the love of Jesus. Your current kingdom assignment is not dependent on whether you work or volunteer in vocational ministry. There will always be opportunities to serve others right where you are, whether you are a busy young mother, retired, listening to this from a hospital bed, or are a new grad ready to take on the world. And maybe today you do feel ready to step into this calling that God has for you. Maybe he's been stirring an idea in you and you feel ready for that new project or even considering changing jobs. If so, today's episode is for you. We have spent a lot of time in this series talking about why women don't feel ready to get started or obstacles that they may have. And we hope that we have inspired some of you to say yes to God anyway. So today we're going to talk about the next steps, but it might not be what you think. Here's Chris and I's conversation on what to do when you're ready to start your own kingdom assignment. We hope you enjoy. Yay, now we're actually recording because Krista and I always just start talking in the beginning. And then I have to remember to save all the good stuff for when we actually press record. Krista, it's you and I this morning, and we are wrapping up our
Good morning,
series
Brittany.
on kingdom assignments. It's good to be with you on this rainy day.
It's good to be here with you, Brittany. I am looking forward to this discussion as we wrap up this series.
Yeah, so this obviously is a term we are familiar with, and it was one of our goals with the podcast that we would get to hear from different women and their missions experience, things that maybe other people wouldn't think of when they thought about a missionary, when they thought about kingdom impact. And there were still, I think, lots of things that I learned along the way. I have a few notes. Hopefully you have a few notes, but I just thought we could start with that. Is there anything that kind of stood out to you in these last five or six episodes, I think, that kind of was even new for you?
For me, a reoccurring theme was openness to what God had for people. There were so many different situations of what people were doing, but if we are so convinced that we know exactly what God has for us, we're likely going to miss some plans for that God may have for us. So I think I heard over and over again in different ways, people being willing to listen and respond to God's calling, new places, out of old places, a tenderness to hear from the Lord. How about you?
Yeah, I think for me, my sense of having the honor and privilege of encouraging women in ministry and helping to lead them is how often they just don't see themselves as someone in ministry or a missionary or someone who has been called and ordained and equipped by God. That was my experience. And yet I was still surprised to hear how so many people have the same story. And I think this came up with Kay, where we had even said, like, between you, her, and I, our stories were quite different and yet all kind of converged at a similar place. And that just with everybody that we talked to, there was always that little bit of an element of how often we meet women that just one of their biggest obstacles is that they don't see themselves as a leader, or they don't see themselves as worthy of maybe the call that God has given them. And so, yeah, just the idea of what a leader is and how they see themselves being one of the major obstacles. I like I said, I thought that it has been my experience, but to hear so many of our guests say the same thing, I think was just like, oh man, yeah, it doesn't matter what country you're in or what age you're in. Like we kind of are all fighting against that a little bit. So I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah, there's very few people I think that we've talked to that set out for any type of
Yeah.
leadership role, it almost took most of us by surprise, but not saying no.
Yeah. Not saying no. Or yeah, actually, I like that better than because I probably would have said just saying yes. But sometimes it's just not saying no. It's like, okay, but what would need to happen in order for me to be able to do that thing or in order for me to take that step? And then sometimes God kind of meets you there already. Is there anything that stood out to you as some pitfalls that maybe we discovered as we talked to different people that maybe keeps women from taking that next step, moving into that thing? We've talked a lot about the thing they're passionate for, the thing they're burdened for. They've probably been thinking about it for a while, and yet just not being able to move into it. What did you kind of see any trends there in pitfalls?
I think the one that would stand out to me would be that people felt like they weren't properly equipped or that they didn't have the tools necessary to do what they thought God was calling them to do. And so it was like, well, it can't be me because
Yeah,
I haven't been properly trained in that way, or it can't be me because I don't have those resources in front of me. But once again, not saying no, saying yes to what God has in front of you may look different than what you thought it was going to look like being that equipped in the way that you thought it would, being trained, having the tools that you thought you needed for those things, but allowing God to do it in your specific life. That would look different from anybody else's.
yeah.
How about you?
Yes, that I was going to say the same thing, and maybe it's even the thing that connects us or what drew us to the School of Women in Ministry in Canada was that realization that there are so many women that are really ready to say yes to God. They're excited, but maybe they're just feeling like they haven't had the same opportunities to be resourced and equipped and trained. Um, Many haven't had. Like it's true that that opportunities are being withheld from them, maybe because of a perception on their age or stage of life they're in, or just the fact that they're women. And so I did really see that, and to me that just continues to fire up that passion for how do we meet that need? And again, I
Mm,
think when we talk
mm,
to people who are in different life stages, who are in different countries, who are in different contexts, I sometimes do expect to hear something different and think, well, that's probably just true for me as a Canadian woman with what I've seen. But yeah, it does seem to always be there. And not to say that people of all genders don't experience that, but we shouldn't shy away from the fact that when it comes to women leading in Christian ministry in North America, maybe specifically to mainline evangelicalism, that there is a disparity in the resources available to them.
mhm.
Sometimes because of the fact that there are people who just don't think that they should be leading in the church. And so why would they need education? Why would they need training? Why would they need mentorship? And sometimes because of internalized messages that we believe about ourselves and what we should be doing. So I think there's a lot going on right now in the world with what we're seeing in the Southern Baptist Convention and the decisions they've been making about women and their ability to preach and teach and lead. That makes me feel like we could only do that today because I'm fired up about it, but we can save that for another time when maybe you and I have had enough sleep to really dive deep into that. But just to say it's on my mind and it's on my heart that as we're talking about this and about women and the assignments that we feel that God has given us and the way that we step into them, that a very large barrier is often we are not given permission to step into them. That feels very hard and very true. So
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going to spend all of our time talking about that. But I think we see over and over again in scripture women that don't fit that script. Um,
yeah.
Women like Abigail, who had to do the right thing for her husband. So David didn't come and kill her husband because he was not making wise decisions. People like Phoebe, who carried Paul's message to the people in Rome and was the one that communicated the message and explained it to the people from Paul. People like Priscilla that saw a man that knew the message of of Christ, but needed some clarification on things, needed further teaching, and she was a part of teaching men, and we see this over and over again in Scripture, and so I just want to encourage the women out there, even if um, there is an organization or a group of people that may not allow you to lead in those different ways. Ultimately, I would encourage you to listen to what God has for you, and you might need to be somewhere else to flourish and fulfill what God has for you. So as we say that,
Mhm.
let's talk about what's next.
Yeah.
So you have this sense God is asking you to do this thing.
Mhm.
Brittany, how do we get started?
Well, sometimes we do have to do it right where we are. And that's the thing about all this is there will be women in churches that have different ideas about leadership, and I'm not I don't start by saying whether you should or shouldn't, or whether you need to change any doctrinal perspectives, because the truth is, whether we are given permission or whether we're given opportunities or whether it even makes sense, God often calls us to do things in hard places. And yeah, I'm just so passionate about saying right where you are, right with what you have, how do we equip you and how do we help you? So
Hmm.
we have spent a lot of time on the podcast talking about spiritual disciplines, something that you and I are both passionate about. It's a pillar within LifeSprings that we just really rely on these things, not just to build ourselves up and our relationship with God, but the way that we pursue a relationship with Jesus in community. So it should be of no surprise that when someone says, "What do I do with this?" that I say it's spiritual disciplines. So I've pulled out a few that I usually have people turn to, because I think, yeah, any decision, any action, any big step is always going to be rooted in, yeah, just spending time with God, pursuing His voice in something. But how do we actually do that? So the other caveat I always say, anytime that I tell people the answer is spiritual disciplines, and especially because some of the language within these things can sound similar to words that are used within New Age mysticism, for example, that I always really, really want to make sure people understand that when I say things like, you're maybe going to start your discernment process, not with asking God for what you want or to tell you what's going to happen, but in devotion. And maybe that looks like time alone, and maybe that looks like fasting, and maybe that looks like meditation. This is not to change God's mind. It's not to bring you enlightenment. It's not to self-actualize or in any way to convince yourself that if you can fast long enough, if you can pray the right things, if you can do the right rituals in the right order, that you can make something happen in your life that is outside of God's will. That's not why we pursue spiritual disciplines, and it's not why we pursue any contemplative or meditative practice. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is not trying to get our way, but trying to make sure we're hearing God's way and making space for that. So I break it down into 3Ds because, like a pastor, I love a 3-point sermon. And if there can be some alliteration, then even better. So the 3 steps in this, and again, this is for someone who they're really feeling like, I think I'm about to make a big step, or I think I might be called to something different. I'm not sure. Is the disciplines of devotion, dependency, and discernment, or rather, I should say dependency, devotion, and discernment, because I'll explain why I think dependency comes first. And so there's different things within those categories. I think some disciplines fit more naturally in the others than others into those things. So I can talk a little bit more about that specific rhythm, but again, it's going to look different for different people, and it looks different depending on your community. So just, yeah, I want that
All
to be
right.
really encouraging. Yeah. I just, again, yeah, you're like, let's go, let's do it. I think we are a spiritual, maybe I'll speak for myself as millennial. I think we're a spiritual generation. Maybe that's why I get so excited about talking about spiritual disciplines and talking about what they are and what they're not. Because I have never seen in my trip to the bookstore, like I'm talking to Chapters Indigo, more tarot cards crystal reading cards, something to do with Venus and Mercury and
Really?
retrograde. I have never seen more. I think we're a spiritual generation. I think when people say you could manifest it, I think I am seeing women who are really longing for a connection to the divine and a connection to what they know and sense is a supernatural and unseen world. And so, yeah, some people might be like, what is Brittany on about? But for people who have kind of dabbled in that new age mysticism, that's where I think there'll be something in this that's going to sound like you can make things happen if you mood board this right. That's not what we're doing. So on that note, I would
Say,
always
as not a millennial from that Gen X generation, I'm like, we're all about just put your head down and get at this, so
yeah.
nobody tries and attacks you from another way because we were the ruthless bullies in school or were bullied. And so it's just I almost want to get to that Saturday Night Live, like you are loved, you are cherished, and gosh darn it, people like you. Anyways,
Yes.
so
I
just
just,
to
I said this
get
the
the
other
other
day.
generation in there.
Someone was asking me, and it was a young woman in our community, and she was discerning whether it was time to say yes to an international mission. It was a high commitment, which I was like, I think you got this. And I think I said out loud in a group of mixed age people from 12 to 90s, like, I would love for you to start with dependency. I would love to see you spend some time in devotion. I would love you to meditate on God's word, meditate on this question and what you know of his, like, meditate on this. And the 80-year-old woman is giving me these giant eyes, like, what are you talking about? And the 26-year-old, who is her sister, is like, I actually start every morning in meditation and yoga. Absolutely. I'm like, so we're actually all saying different things. That's why I just have that. So when I say to start independency, this is for a few reasons. And I think, just like you said, Krista, depending on what generation you come from, and even depending on your culture, different parts of this might be really important. So when I say we start with spiritual disciplines of dependency, some of those might be, well, the biggest one is Sabbath. Um, Silence and solitude might also fit into spiritual disciplines around dependency, things that are more communal, like our corporate worship as well. So we start in dependency, understanding who it is that we get our strength from for a few different reasons. One of them is, it is so, anytime we're excited about something, and it's me, I'm someone who gets excited about something and it's like, I am 10 out of 10. I can make this happen. Who needs sleep anyways? Just the idea that we can make something happen for ourselves is it's so tempting. It's right there. And so we don't ever want to start this new thing, this thing God's calling to us, by not taking time to push that lie away and by not taking time to really realize who it is that we're doing this in and through and for. And so I think the spiritual discipline of Sabbath, being the biggest one, that I think connects to dependency, is the place to start. And all of that is like, again, I think different people struggle with this different, but even the fact that most of us treat Sunday, it's the last day of the week, right? Like, that's how it feels. It's actually the first day of the week, but we do not act that way because we all know that you redline it. So you start Monday, you're eager, you're hopeful, you redline it by Thursday, you crash into Saturday, you come up on Sunday and you're like, all right, what's left for God? So we don't want to do that in our week. And that's another conversation for another time. But we really don't want to do this when we are at the beginning of something, that new kingdom assignment. I think God's calling me to something new, a different season, a different project. So we're just going to spend time resting. And for so many people, when they're like, I am excited, I woke up at 2 a.m. thinking about this, I feel burdened for this, I have vision, I'm inspired, and I say, I want you to start by taking a break and resting, that sounds crazy. That sounds like the wrong direction. What are we doing? And again, as a woman who, Krista, you know me well enough to know, just likes to make things happen and get after it, it is so countercultural and it is so counterintuitive that that is why I know I'm on to something. So we're going to start by resting. Part of what that's going to do is we're just spending time with God. And because we are commanded to, and we were created with this need for him, that this is a part of how he created us. And we don't want to rush into the next thing. Maybe you are like my young friend who recently finished high school. She kind of had a few ideas of what university was going to look like, what the next couple of years of her life was going to look like. And then God had different plans, and it was really on her heart for her to leave to do this international mission, join an international mission organization. So it was quite different than the plan she had for herself. But otherwise, I mean, to say it's not like she was mid-career, I feel like downplays the significance of the season. It's not like she had less on the line. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it is different if you are someone who has just spent 10 years working obsessively hard in your ministry, in your job, in your life. Maybe your kids just moved out, and for the first time, life looks very different, and you haven't even caught a breath yet. That's what I mean by to start and rest, and to avoid the temptation to run into the next thing, I think is very, very important. I do think it came up in a few times, particularly with some of the things that Sandy said, where I thought, has this woman ever taken a break in her life? When you look, like I had to edit down her speaker profile, for it was too long. She had done too many things. It's just, I don't know how, when they slept, her and her husband, with all the ministries they covered and all the things that she did. And yet I know that Sandy is a cautious and prayerful woman. So yeah, just, I think that there is a risk, and there's a tendency when we finish one thing to say, okay, well, what now, God? And we talked about this in this series a little bit. You'll have to remind me if you can what episode it came up in, but there might even be if I'm not, maybe you're a retired teacher. If I'm not, Sandy the teacher, if I'm not Brittany this, if I'm not this, then who am I? And what am I? And so there might be, not for everyone, but there might be a little bit of a risk that when you say, I think God has something next for me, I need to know what my next assignment is. It's not because God's like, let's go, but because you are uncomfortable with the space in between. I have been there. So it's me that I can speak directly to. I have been there where I came out of a very full, very busy, I had to work very hard. And then there was all this space and time to be alone with God. And it breaks my heart to say, but somehow it didn't feel like enough. I was like, yeah, I have more time to spend with you and worship you and submit my dependency on you, God. But like, what am I doing? Like what's next?
But what's the title?
But what's the title? What's the thing? And if you are not starting in dependency, I am that this is who I am. I am just a child of God, entirely reliant on him for my identity, for my life, for my direction. I think you can get caught up in that. Maybe you think that he needs you to do something in order to be worthy of his love. Maybe you need a mission. Maybe you need a project to feel important, to feel valuable to your church. Someone who's retired, well, I've had retired ones where I've got to be doing something. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Because I think that your family and the time you spend with them, I think they love you. And I think that that's really important. And I think that when you spend time just worshiping the Father and being with him, I think he thinks that's really important. So we have to make space so that we know within ourselves that the reason why we're moving on to this next assignment, project, job, whatever it is not actually out of a place of our own need, but out of our dependency of God. And when we take that space, I think it helps us see that. I also think that the rest helps us realize that we need rest. I hope that makes sense. Have you ever been so busy, probably so overworked and so tired that you actually convince yourself that everybody else is suckers? And who needs 8 hours anyways? Also, coffee clearly trumps food. And you just get used to that pace. And then you slow down and you're like, how? If you slow down long enough and you break long enough, you eventually are like, how did I ever keep that up? That was wild. And so if you don't take that pace, I think you actually kind of lose a sense for how enriching, how important, and how fulfilling the Sabbath is, and how much you need it. So we're not going to rush into the next thing. How am I doing so far? Does that make sense as to why we would not start anything without practicing disciplines of dependency and resting?
Yeah, I think what you're saying, if I'm going to summarize it, comes
Please do.
down to motive.
Yep.
Motive. Are we doing this for our own self-fulfilling, self-acknowledgement, or are we doing this because we truly want a deeper relationship with God? And ministry is an overflow from that relationship. Now, there are absolutely times when ministry becomes the thing, and
Yeah.
then we don't have time for that relationship with God because we're too busy doing ministry.
Yes.
And we have all seen this, and we have seen the
Yes.
ministries that are toxic and have fallen apart or look very shiny on the outside. But once you get a little closer, you see that things are not right. And and so I think starting with dependency is just that grounding of
Yep.
my motivation here is out of love for the God who loves me most, who loves me
Yes.
more than anything, and wanting to be connected, and everything else is the overflow. And if we get that motive backwards, in the I need to stay busy, I need to justify my presence, we're going to miss out on God
Yep.
in the midst of doing ministry.
Yep.
That's what I'm hearing in dependency.
But also rest. Like again, my young friend, so you just finished high school. I know that and for people who forget, that last year in particular, with all the exams, especially someone who had their sights on some pretty significant university programs where you have to have the grades to get in. You worked really hard. Have you taken time to rest before you decided to make this life changing decision? I know you don't want to rest. I know you're very young and you have all this energy,
Yeah.
but have you taken time to rest and just like relax, work a work a dead end job, and just come home and hang out with your friends before you're kind of like, what is the next best thing? And some people need a little bit of rest, and some people need a lot more. And so, not I'm not going to say how much. I think the size of the decision and the season you are in and the season you're moving into will tell you how much rest you need, whether it is I'm going to take a weekend retreat with my husband and we are just going to spend time in that versus I need to take a year before I move into the next thing. Okay, so the second kind of category of spiritual disciplines is devotion. And so I will be grateful, Krista, for your summary for people to interpret at the end, because I think that this sounds very similar to what we've just said when I say the second
Mm.
one is to pursue spiritual disciplines within the category of devotion. So I would say that those are going to be worship, prayer. I mean, you're doing these things during Sabbath and stuff too, but worship and prayer, and I think specifically reading and studying the scriptures. So you would be doing those things during your Sabbath anyways. That's why people are like, what is this really is this a second stage? It is, because we really need to know the shepherd to be able to recognize his voice. So,
Yeah.
and you may have, and this is where those two steps might kind of cross over with what you just said, Krista, about sometimes in ministry we're so busy, sometimes in life we're so busy, sometimes we're actually so busy praying for others that we realize that we haven't prayed just on our own and for ourselves in a really long time. And so you may think, I spend so much time in devotion. I spend so much time studying the scriptures, but it's just not always true. And in order to be able to ask God, is this next thing what you have for me? Is it in line with your will? Is this making me more in your image, Jesus? We have to know what that is. And we have to know his voice. So I would tell people, after you've taken some rest, again, you're not resting, but also studying and spending a lot of time being like, is just rest, just rest, depend on the Lord, know who you are in him. Okay. When you're moving into the second stage, this devotion, declaring God's holiness, declaring his will over your life, studying the scriptures, seeking to know his character, this is when you can also hold that up against what it is that you're discerning. So say you are trying to decide whether to start a community garden and it's going to be a lot of work. Maybe there's a big financial investment. yeah, let's use that example. Maybe it's going to be a lot of work. I actually know nothing about gardening. Having 3 weeks of straight rain in Edmonton and not understanding what anyone's talking about, how this impacts our gardens, I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. But I've been told it's a lot of work. Maybe you also have a newborn. And so you're like, but I'm feeding people. That looks like Jesus ministry. But this is good and this is good. But what do we know about the character of God? And what does he tell us about his burden being easy and light? And so then when we take what we know about God and what we know about Jesus and what we know about the way that he ministered to people and even his disciples and how much time he gave them to rest and eat and celebrate and build relationships, then not only are we holding up our decision against what we know about God, but we're holding up the ministry that we think we're being called to against what Jesus shows us about his ministry. So I would say, regardless of what that project, that ministry, that kingdom assignment is, to spend time intentionally in the Gospels and just look at how Jesus spent time with people. Look at how he spent time with the people he was discipling, and the type of ministry that he was building. Jesus didn't skip the wedding. Like it is not this picture of like grind every day, pull your boots up by their straps. There's a time in my life where I would say you have as many hours in the day as Beyonce. Like that is not who Jesus is. Yes, he is radically loving, but it shouldn't break you. And so it might be a beautiful thing that you feel burdened for, but does that allow you to emulate the character of Christ and the rest of your life? And if it's going to break your family, your marriage, if it's going to make you a worse person where you are about ready to punch someone in traffic, well, you've spent this time in devotion, worshiping, praying, reflecting on the character of God. And so hopefully you are readily able to just be aware of, yeah, is this thing that you think you're being called to, is this going to make you more like Jesus or maybe a little bit less like Jesus? So, of course, anytime we spend praying, worshiping, and studying the scriptures is always fruitful, but specifically in this stage, yeah, that you would be holding up kind of this decision, this feeling that you have next to that, not to get an answer. This isn't about, and by the time I finish reading, all the gospels, God is going to tell me yes or no. When am I moving? Where am I going? It's just to really be able to recognize his voice. What do you think about that for stage 2? Too ambiguous?
Yeah. No, no, not at all. Yeah, if you're too busy, so once again, you needed to start with that place of rest.
Yeah.
If you're too busy, you can't do these things and have them be fruitful. They can't, just as you were talking about all the rain and stuff, if you're not watering the
Mm-hmm.
plants, you, they're not going to grow. Uh,
Yeah.
and so we need to, yeah, have the Sabbath space, to have the time and the patience to hear from God. And once we do that, we can actually hear his voice.
Yes.
And and so it's the both and is what those
Yes.
first two seem like so far.
I've separated them because I used to not separate them. And then people would say to me, and I would say to me, why can't I do dependency and devotion at the same time? Okay, so I'll take a break. I'll take a month off. And in that month, I'll read these 6 books. And I'm also going to pray about this and I'm going to study the scriptures so that, okay, I have it in my mind that I can do this. And then no, that's not what I said. So if you're already thinking, Brittany, I could Sabbath and study the scriptures so that I can get the answer that I want to go do the next thing, you already did it. You already did the thing where you traded your time alone with God for no reason other than you are completely dependent on him for, I could be productive in this time. I could use this as piece of how I am getting myself to the next thing. And especially if, as I said in stage 1, especially if what might be going on is a little bit of discomfort with, if I am not part of something, leading something, doing something, producing something, that am I even worthy? Like, that's why I'm like, I actually don't want you to do those 2 things at the same time because of how easy it is to say, okay, I'm going to study the scriptures because I'm going to spend time soaking in, because this is what Brittany told me is the first stage for me going to Bible college. No, it doesn't need to produce. It doesn't need to have an objective.
Right.
You have to spend time with God because he's your father and he wants that time with you and you need that time with him. So that's kind of why they sound the same, but I've actually separated those two steps so that you're just fully rested and then you move into that intentional study, but there is that little bit more of a purpose. Okay. So the third one is
Mm-hmm.
spiritual disciplines that have to do with discern. And this is the one where if someone comes to me and says, I want you to pray with me about this thing, I'm trying to make this decision, or I think God might be asking me to start a ministry where we connect single mothers in the city. I, I think I'm doing this thing. What they're often asking me is, will you help me discern whether it's the right time or whether it's the right thing or whether I'm supposed to be doing this? And that's why I'm always like, I think you might have missed two steps. So I think all of this becomes part of the discernment process. Certainly, what I'm saying, I want you to hold up what you know about the character of God to what you think you're being asked to do. But I intentionally leave that as a third step so that people really understand that we're doing those things and that it doesn't need to be part of the question. So in the third stage, this is when we actually get to do that. So I think that corporate spiritual disciplines, when we talk about praying together, when we talk about corporate fasting, when we talk about even, I don't know too many in my context that would observe this as a discipline, but some people still watch, as in they skip sleep, they stay up all night together.
Mm.
Yeah, they call it watching, and it's kind of what part of what they think is happening in the garden when Jesus asks his disciples to stay up and watch with him. So they might. This is not something I do because no one actually wants me to help them make decisions when I haven't slept, but I know that is part of some faith tradition. So they might be fasting, they might be watching together, they're praying together, and you're kind of on your own as well, entering into prayers around discernment and asking a question. But if God is not a magic 8 ball, you're specifically forming those prayers around be aligned with his will rather than saying, God, I need to know what your will is or, what I should be doing. Sometimes in Life Springs, we talk a lot about the prayer of indifference. So this is one of those prayers that I think would fall into those disciplines around discernment. So again, the prayer is not, God, I really want this job. I really like, Father, I'm like, I need you to make this happen. The prayer is, God, make me indifferent to anything but your will. If it is not your will that I would be in this job, in this place, in this program, that I wouldn't even want it. So that's a very different prayer.
Mm.
And if you're curious about prayers of indifference, we have a whole podcast episode on it, so you can go back and listen. And we also talk about fasting as well. So I would recommend, and we also, of course, have another episode that I loved with Carol Potratz, where she talks about very, very specifically and practically how she does this with people. But I would say 3 to
Yeah.
5 people. So I loved, she pointed out that it's an odd number of people specifically, so that there is an opportunity to say we are not unanimous on this and that there's not an uncomfortable tie. So I would invite 3 to 5 people who you consider to be godly, mature followers of Jesus to be praying with you for this. So what I would do is I would first go to those people. I would say I have to spend time resting. I started with Sabbath.
Mm-hmm.
I've spent time, just declaring my dependency on God. I've spent time in devotion. I've been studying his word. I've been studying and seeking to know the character of God, the character of Christ, and what his ministry looks like. And now I have this decision to make, or I think I'm at this place where I need to step into this thing. So you invite these 3 to 5 people and just tell them what it is. And then you're going to pray about it. You can pray together in that moment. Why wouldn't you? But take some time. Again, depending on how big of a decision this is depending on how much time. If it's a little thing, a day. If it's a big thing, it could be weeks. So then you're going to go and you're all just going to pray about it and do everything you can to avoid texting those people every day and saying, what did God tell you I should do? What did God tell you? Don't do that. Just let them pray about it. Let them sit with it. Trust that if you have picked people again, that you have recognized are mature followers of Jesus, that they are taking it very seriously. And they are praying in the same way that I'm saying we ought to, which is with indifference. And so they're not saying, God, you need to give us the answer to this. They're saying we are indifferent to anything but your will, and that we desire to see what your will for this person is. So they're going to spend time praying about it, and then you're going to come back together and you're going to find out what everybody heard. And you're hoping that people heard the same thing. And then that would be so encouraging and so affirming if when you get back together, everybody is telling you that they heard the same thing. That would be very exciting and very inspiring, but you might hear some pauses. And so a big part of this is just to take that seriously. And if it's not a no, but I felt like God, brought this to my attention, or maybe God just really gave me this question to ask you. If your immediate sense is, I feel so discouraged that not everybody is giving me green light to go, to not rush through that, to sit with it, to really ask yourself, why do I feel so discouraged? What
Yeah.
what was it? This is the question that I like to ask people. What would you have gained if everybody said yes? And what do you think you stand to lose if someone said no? And that might bring you right back to the first stage. So if you're like, well, I guess I was
Right.
really disappointed because when, my fourth person said, I think God said, no, you need to wait. And what was going on in my heart is I thought, oh, why don't they think that I can do this? Or, well, because am I not important enough to God? I don't know. I'm just giving examples. But so I would be thinking, oh, so you think that if there's a no, that like God doesn't love you, or you're not worthy, or you're not called. So that's something that we need to sit and think about and pray about and reflect on, because we're not going to make a big decision. We are not going to build a ministry that is supposed to be centered on glorifying Jesus out of our own need to be validated and cared for and loved. And I say that as someone who has come dangerously close to making big decisions out of a need to feel seen and validated and loved and worthy. So I think that that's a risk for anyone. That's not if
Yeah.
you're going this, it's because you're a bad person. I think it's just a risk for anyone. So if you come out of it and you're like, okay, some people had some pauses, cool. Some people, you know what I mean? And you feel almost indifferent about it. That's such a good sign. We can be excited and we can be passionate without kind of scorching through all of those signs. So, yeah, those are my 3 steps to before we start something new. What do you think of that last
I love it.
stage? Okay.
Yes. No, the inviting other people in. I mean, I specifically think of our conversation with Carol Potretz
Yep.
and with Sandy Semenina,
Yep.
because Sandy has that one person that is her prayer partner, that they know they are praying for each other. And it can be, I'm going to do this thing, be praying for me. And having that trust in that other person to be listening for you, with you,
Mm-hmm.
and being vulnerable, to not just having that be a rubber stamp
Yep.
and saying, yeah, somebody's
Yep.
praying for me. These people are praying for me. Therefore, I move forward. But truly having people praying for you, with you, and being vulnerable enough to hear a no
Yeah.
is huge.
And Sandy was so clear about it.
Because God
And you,
says use the no.
yeah. And you know that we even started our episode, we interviewed how much you and I love her. She was so clear about it. She was like, there is no world where I start something without taking it to my prayer partner first. Like, it's just
Yeah.
not an option. And I love that. I love that she said that. It, and what I'm talking about just now is kind of, you're really at that place of making it, maybe it's a new job, about making a big step. But she was just even saying, like, before I get on stage and speak somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and something I've spoken about 100
Mm-hmm.
times, I'm talking, my prayer partner is praying for me. So the beautiful
Mm-hmm.
thing
Mm-hmm.
about, okay, so we're at the beginning of something. Again, maybe it's a project, maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a ministry, maybe it's just even I feel like God's asking me to serve someone in this way. If you started by saying, I don't do anything in and through and for God without prayer and without people who are praying and lifting me up, then when you are in the middle of that ministry, when you are Sandy, who's been doing this for years and she's still being asked to go stage, you're not going to miss it. You're like, well, of course I have to pray. Like, I
Right.
didn't start this
Yeah.
thing without starting in prayer. So I thought that was really beautiful. Now, sometimes when I talk about this, Krista, and that's why I was like, are you tracking with me? Again, I've had so many people that are like, I don't see why this is 3 stages. Like, why are you not just kind of doing this all at one time? Like, why are we breaking up? Why can't I just say, ooh, I feel really called to this. I'm excited about it. So I'm just going to spend some time resting and worshiping and asking people to pray about this. I know I'm someone who just, like, I would have a tendency to rush into things, but do you kind of see, Krista, how it might be a pitfall to try and do it all at the same time? Or am I just someone who's extra impulsive and needs the concrete routine of the 3-step?
I can see one of the pitfalls of it would be is that you are making this decision and you've gone through all the things and then you're like, and now I'm going to pray about it. But if you've already
Yep.
started the
Yep.
process, then it could be oh, and now I'm hearing a no. And what do I do? Because now things are already rolling and I'm going to have people upset, or I'm going to have to back out of something or whatever, because I didn't take the time to listen first, to discern first, to slow down
Yeah.
and love God first. I just,
Yeah.
I went first to doing the thing and then went to get is this okay? Is this okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you're 19 and your mom also had a very specific idea of what she thought the next 5 years of your life is going to look like. And to have that parent say to me, it's okay, because we started by saying we wanted to be indifferent to anything but God's will. Like, how that invites people who love you and support you to be part of that, I think is really significant. And yeah, if you kind of are already in process and then you're like, I'm really worried I'm going to disappoint someone when I say, I don't think this is right, or I don't think this time, or actually I'm saying yes to something else, how much harder that is when, as you said, you've kind of already skipped that step, you already sent in the application before, anyone even knew that this was something you're
Right.
processing. So yeah,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this so much. I use the 3Ds. I talked about this at an open house that we had for the School of Women in Ministry at the beginning of what would be like our ministry year. And yeah, haven't thought too much about it as far as the way that I teach it. And it was this series, and I just thought, of all people who might be hearing this and thinking, I do think God has an assignment for me. I do, like, I'm feeling really like, yeah, I know what my burden is. There's this thing I've been thinking of for a while. Maybe now's the right time. And that maybe they'd say, okay, well, now what? So do I just go do it? Do I just, should I just go sign up for a course? Should I just, and just to say that there is a step in between. I loved when Sandy talked about just you can be who God has for this. And it's true that you're called, and the people around you have affirmed you, and we've prayed about it, and we're all in. And it's also true that you don't know how to public speak, or it's also true that you are going to this country and you don't actually speak the language. So, so you do need to learn to do that. So in kind of spending that time as well, it that might help slow you down in that. And so, yeah, all these things can be true. And there might still be pieces where you might just need to get equipped and you might need to learn. But because of what I believe is a North American mindset that kind of says our limitation is always a knowledge deficit, I think it's very easy for us to say, I can do anything if I took the course, if I learned the thing, I just need to read the book. And so I don't think we need to tell people as often in our context that I've seen, I need you to slow down and actually learn to speak French before you go to France. Or I need you to, learn how to public speak before you go and teach these people how to do this thing. But I do think that they need to be told to slow down and to rest and to study God's word even more than you thought that you had to, specifically looking for his character, specifically looking for how he leads people in ministry. And I think they need to be told that discernment is a very slow and careful process.
So just as we're coming into these summer months here, or maybe wherever you are is a little bit more summer than what we have gotten already. But as we are in these summer months here, it's usually a really great opportunity to slow down,
Yeah.
stare at nature for a while, see God at work in and around you, and take that time to rest, take that time to spend with people that you value the work of God in their
Hmm.
lives. and see what they have to say. This is not a solitude process.
Yeah.
Ministry always means other people.
Yep.
Don't do it alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And how many times do we hear, whether it's someone going on sabbatical or taking a summer vacation, and they're like, and while I'm on vacation, I'm going to read these books and I'm going to learn this thing. And they're like, no, just rest and enjoy it. So we have a breather month within
Yeah.
Life Springs. That's August. So there'll be a break for us there, which is always hard for me to accept. And then when I get there, it's amazing and beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah, so really, really would encourage people, if you already have a break coming up, if you already have some rest that you have planned for, that you have booked on the vacation planner. Yeah, that is a good first step for kind of whatever God has for you next. That's exactly where you should be. So that's exciting. So who knows what we're going to hear in September about where people are at and what they're ready to step into. No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah. Krista, you have had the opportunity to be mentored by people as a young adult and as a not as young adult, and you've also had the opportunity to kind of pray for and speak to other young women or women who are just ready to start something different. What advice would you give them? It does not have to be a 40-minute 3-point message, but what would you say to them about what to do at the kind of the beginning of this process?
The beginning of this process. You don't need to have all the answers from the beginning. You don't need to have the total outline. You don't need to have the 5-year plan, but you do need to have God. And so start with God, start with people that love you.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's just one step. Yeah. Start there. And don't worry about having it all figured out. That's where I would start. I mean, there's so much more, but start there. Start knowing that you are loved and that you can live out of a place of rest and a place of joy and belonging before ever needing to do anything about it. Get to the doing, because that is part of the joy and the fun of being a part of the kingdom, which is why we have kingdom assignments, but start out of a place of fullness.
Yes. Oh, that's so much more concise than all the things I just said. I so appreciate you.
Yeah. I love doing this together.
Yeah, so good. All right. This is it for Kingdom Assignments. But we explored a lot. We said a lot. I've loved it. It's been so cool, even for me. There's been some things that have challenged me and stretched me. Did we ever decide what our next series that people can be excited about?
You and I had some ideas. I don't know if we've totally decided, but it was going to be some head knowledge things. Now that we've done our prayers, we've talked about these assignments, we were going to get into a little bit more of the heady stuff.
Yes, which
We'll see.
Exciting for me. We had, as part of our last cohort in the School of Women in Ministry, some really, really incredible instructors. And just even some topics that we felt were essential to what we were trying to do in mobilizing, equipping, and empowering women for ministry. So we get to spend some time on that, and I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
Okay. Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.